Catapulting Commissions family, what's up, team? Welcome back to this week's episode of the Catapulting Commissions podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Garcia. Today, our guest comes from the other side of the world, as the Catapulting Commissions show is constantly looking for the top and most talented sales professionals, sales leaders, and sales trainers around the world. We bring them onto the show. We talk about catapulting commissions and ways to grow your commissions, increase your sales hood, increase the sales hood of the team you manage, or increase the commissions of the team you manage. And we continue to find the best guests in the world. Thank you for joining us this week. Our guest is Sarah Jolley-Jarvis. She's an international best-selling author, a speaker. She is helping businesses secure more sales. She's from Warwick, England. Her entire brand has the most incredible title I've ever seen, Selling Without Sleaze. And we're going to talk about that concept. She has a book under the same name. She is the founder and CEO of Selling Without Sleaze Limited. She has built this company in sales training and has been doing it for an incredible amount of time. Excited to have her on the show. Sarah, thanks for joining the Catapulting Commissions podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, Sarah. So let's talk about this. Selling Without Sleaze. So I hear this title, and I think of when someone says, hey, what do you do for a living? And I say, oh, I'm a sales professional, right? To the person who's not in sales, they're like, oh, it's like, I mean, if I tell I'm a salesperson, it's like, I don't know, the career criminal and salesperson is like right above it in some people's eyes. They mean you just hear when you're like, oh, I work in sales, right? And it's always because don't get me wrong, there's really crappy salespeople out there. We all know that, right? If there wasn't, you and I wouldn't have a job. So there are people who give sales professionals a bad name, but that's not the majority of the industry. So tell us a little bit. Selling Without Sleaze, where did this come from?
It kind of evolved from, I was talking around sales, and at the time it was part of the same business my husband and I were running. So he does lead generation, I do lead conversion. And it turned out that I started to do training under my own name to split it out from the business. And I was just like, I just felt like it needed to be more of a brand. And going through and talking about it, it was like actually in quite a few of my lives, I'd actually said, without being sleazy, you don't have to sell your soul to increase your sales. And so it kind of evolved from there. And then a mentor we're working with at the time was like, well, what about Selling Without Sleaze? And obviously then you go onto these little search engines and see if someone's taken the website, which they hadn't. And so it kind of, evolved from there. So I'm a big fan of saying what it says in the tin. And so, that's what it's all around is helping people with sales techniques where they don't actually have to feel compromised as far as their own ethics are concerned.
When you say that, I definitely want to dive into separating the lead gen and lead conversion, because I think too many times you get agencies that try to combine the two into one, and it does create some challenges, right? It's two different skill sets. Can I get people go ahead.
It totally is. I think the thing was that actually I end up working quite a lot with the clients we have within the agency, but the clients who need my help aren't the people who are ready to scale up. So I work people who are generating sales a lot more organically. And so they're not in a position to start running paid ads. And when, people come to us who are more of my sort of approach and need my help the most, they tend to be those people who, they're not in a position to scale up. They might want to, but actually their messaging and everything else needs to be right before you put the magnifying glass that is paid advertising on their product offering.
Yeah, it's that's an eye-opening conversation for entrepreneurs when they come in. Everybody wants to grow and scale, but it's hard. That's a difficult conversation, because are you ready to grow and scale? Because if I'm going to go and spend, $10,000 a month on paid ads, do you have a system in place to handle it? And the number can get bigger depending on the company, and the number can get smaller depending on the company. So that lead gen versus lead conversation, that in itself could be a whole different episode on what creates a great lead gen company.
Well, to be honest, my husband's probably better talking to you about that one than me. But and that's the thing, is he's doing more and more consulting around that. Is like, actually, are you ready? Everyone wants to start running ads and putting money behind it, but a lot of the time they want to do that because if they've got a problem with their organic, they want to start paying ads because they think, I know, I'll put money behind it and it'll be all right. But actually, it literally does just put a magnifying glass on your offer. It points out all the little issues with it that haven't resonated organically. And so, Facebook just ends up charging you for the feedback of it's not resonating with your audience. You can get that for free.
Yeah, and take advantage of it for free. I know firsthand. Nobody would be where they're at if they didn't make mistakes. So I know what it's like to run paid ads, get no sales, and you're like, what in the world? Oh, and Facebook gives you this little monthly email recap. You spent X amount of dollars. I'm like, I didn't get nothing out of it, right? so listen, Catapulting Commissions family, if you are in that position and you want to scale and grow your business, and you have let's say a small, medium-sized business, and you're looking to scale it, utilize an ad strategy, get lead generation taking place, I would encourage you to look at your business with a magnifying glass. I'd encourage you to hire a consultant, an expert, get with someone that looks at it and says, you are ready or you are not ready. And here's what you need to do. Don't, there's no, ego is like the death of growth. Like, so if you have that ego and you're like, oh, my company's definitely ready, it's really not. I mean, I've had it is very, very expensive.
Really expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I even know when I've appeared on podcast episodes or media appearances sometimes when, my funnel wasn't ready or different things earlier in my career. And I'm like, holy crap, dude, I'm not ready to capture all this new attention that's coming at me. I wasn't ready. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's, we have to learn and grow from that. But Sarah, you said something earlier. You said you work with people on how to sell without compromising their ethics.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I think, well, kind of winding it back a bit, I'm on a bit of a mission to help people see that actually you can generate sales, you can do sales successfully without having to sell your soul, without having to do things that don't sit right with you ethically. And so it's about equipping people with the resources, with the tools, with the skills to be able to go out and sell their product to their ideal clients. And that's what I'm all about. That's what I'm really passionate about doing. Within the sales industry, we obviously know that the tactics that people see on the periphery, which, are quite scary. I mean, when I came into the online world, I couldn't believe the type of things that sales trainers were putting out there and suggesting people did. And so that was, one of the reasons I got into this, because it was so shocking, because I come from a really regulated industry, and I was like, you couldn't possibly say any of those things. And I think I've been in a really fortunate position because I've come from a regulated industry. I've had to learn to sell the proper way, appropriately, without doing all the pressure tactics and everything else. But, I've seen them and I've had them encouraged to me at times. But, you can be successful, as I have been successful in my sales career, without going beyond your, I call chili, so I say that sleaze is like a chili scale. So, where you're on that scale is where you're happy to function at. That's where your customers, people who are your people, will be attracted to you at that level. For some people, I'm a bit of a korma girl, so anything hotter than chicken tikka masala and I'm done. Whereas, for some people, they're only just starting out at that point. Equally with the whole, how direct you want to be, what language you want to use, how assertive you want to be in a sales conversation, it's on that scale, but it's meeting people, my client wise, meeting them where they're at and helping them to build those resources in their own style.
When you break it down that way, it literally takes the component of sales and says, I'm gonna treat you like a human because I'm a human too. I mean, that's it at its core, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
A whole book, I didn't need to write a whole book; just the one page would have done it.
I'm going to treat you like a human because I'm a human. But hearing you say this, Sarah, it's enlightening. It's exciting. I share a lot of the resonance. Like when I first started looking at some of the sales trainers and some of the philosophies being taught, right, and this. It's garbage. It is just this high pressure, sleazy. I'm gonna follow up with you till the day I die. I'm gonna keep asking you, have you made a decision? I'm gonna be in your face. I'm gonna be aggressive. And I look at it and I'm like, there's a time and place for everything. And if that is the only tool, because that's a tool when deployed at certain times, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, can be effective. I don't know if it's effective for the long term. I think our consumers are smarter now than they've ever been before. I think many times salespeople sacrifice a transactional sale for a long-term customer. So there's a lot of that going on. But to hear you say that in you make sales fun. You make it enlightening. You make it a part of a normal conversation. So let me ask you this: are salespeople born or are they trained?
Oh, I think they can be trained. I've met in the whole time that I've been doing this. I was a product manager before that. I was in the sales team. I was helping train sales team members. I've only met 2 people. I may have recently met my third, so 3 people ever who the jury's still out on them though. I'm not totally giving up, but 3 people who shouldn't sell, who should pass it on to somebody else to sell for them. By the time you get to, in my case, most of my clients are running their own businesses. By the time you get to that stage, you have a certain level of communication to have made it that far. You can capitalize on that communication. I think lots of people think they need to be extroverted when actually I prefer to help introverts. But it's a lot. I think there's a lot of skills you can take from normal life. There's a lot of scenarios where you're naturally selling. And I think honing them and kind of molding them, you're just taking those skills, they're all rough around the edges, and you're molding them into something a lot more succinct, to something which you can, really sort of cut through and get to the point. And I think that's what you're kind of aiming at. So, they're like little rough diamonds. You can definitely take the vast majority of people and help them sell more. Some people are going to be naturally more talented than others. It's like musicians, it's like everything. But at the end of the day, hard work will go better than natural talent if you're not going to put any effort in.
Yeah, 100%. Hard work always overcomes talent. But I'm interested. You said most people think you have to be an extrovert. You prefer to work with introverts. So
I saw that face. He was like, I noticed you clocking it.
I made a mental note. I'm like, I'm not going to let that go. That's a good one. It's true. There's so many people that say you have to be an extroverted, outgoing, type A personality to succeed in sales. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I know some silent killers that are the quietest person in the room, but generate the most revenue. So help me understand, when you say you prefer to work with introverted people that want to become a salesperson, what does that journey look like? Let's say I come to you and I say, okay, Sarah, I have my small business. I don't like being on the phone. I don't like Zooms. I don't want to outgoing. I feel like I'm bothering people, right? This is the key. I don't want to bother people. And I'll use this from my wife, right? My wife owns a business. She actually owns a couple businesses, and she grows organically, but when it comes to her outbounding, she's like, I don't want to bother people. People will see me. I'm like, no, you said you're married. I'm married. Happy wife, happy life. I am not going to be her sales trainer. So I am not going to tell her what to do. But in that same capacity, I'm going to have her listen to this episode. So how does somebody who chooses to be introverted succeed in sales? What's the steps? How do they get comfortable? Help me understand this.
I think, well, for me, my thought process tends to be, I don't tend to categorize them, but it does tend to be quite obvious when somebody comes to you, whether they are the introvert, the extrovert. I think my key thing with extroverts is that we can be, I say we because I am quite extrovert, sometimes they're just waiting for the customer to shut up so they can talk. And so they're not actually listening. And I think listening is quite a tricky skill to teach. And I'd rather be teaching somebody to get their message out there, and you've got their passion to capitalize on. If somebody runs that business, if they're really into their product, whether they own the business or not, if you're really into your product, you can't wait to share that information. And even for an introvert, that's getting them that little bit more potentially assertive. Then you've got the fact that I always liken it. We go through, we discuss stuff, but it boils down to, in a nutshell, that you wouldn't let your best friend pass by an opportunity. And if they were doing something that you thought was really dumb, or they were missing up an opportunity which was really smart. I had one of my friends a few months ago, and they were looking at passing up on a dream job because they didn't feel the timing was right. And I could not hold myself back with telling them, actually, no, you know what? You've got to get out there. You've got to do that because that's right for you. And in the same way, if you're really passionate over your product and your product can truly help that perfect customer, that ideal customer, are you really going to sit by and let that person sell past when they could have been a perfect example of how great your offering is? From that person was a walking testimonial. They were walking evidence that what you do is amazing. You just needed that person to take up that opportunity. And I think if you approach the sales process as, you have something, that person has a need or a want, and you can fulfill that need or want. If you can't, then that's a totally different conversation. But assuming you can, and you can, then why wouldn't you want to tell them about it? You're doing them a disservice not to. And so rather than thinking, I'm bothering that person, you're switching your brain to thinking, I'm I'm a problem to them if I don't tell them.
I like that. Yeah, you are a problem. Like you have the magic that can make their life easier. And I like how you say that, right? You're a problem if you don't share it, if you don't talk about it, if you don't have that conversation. Yeah. Too many times I think the newer or introverted or people who aren't comfortable with sales feels like it's this creepy, like I'm gonna try to sell you something, and it's not really that. I mean, it's you have a problem, I have a solution. I feel really bad if I didn't tell you about my solution. So I like that concept. So in Selling Without Sleaze, let's talk about some of the sleaze that you eliminate with your methodologies that you teach, right? So let's give me some of the things that you say, hey, this is what we're not going to do. This is not what sales is, or this is not what I teach. What would those statements be?
This is really great timing, because we're creating ads at the moment, and we've done I did a little skit before on like things that people say, and we've got the team to refilm it today. So
exciting.
This is totally what I've spent the entire day doing this. So the false scarcity, if you don't buy it now, then you're never going to have the opportunity. And the thing is everybody knows that you need to provide some sort of push or pull factor for someone to make a decision, because otherwise it just they go along with their life, and other things take over, and before you know it, they've forgotten how important that need was, or a competitor's come in. So you want to close that deal, you want to move that process along, but using false scarcity, as you said before, our audiences have got smarter and smarter. Everyone, all these different things that are going on, all these timers and everything else, people are like, oh yeah, and then that same deal will be up next week. That it's just not, it doesn't conjure them up the way it used to anyway, but it's still being used. People are still doing the false scarcity thing. The thing about, I've got to go and check with my boss, and ramp up that, we never give discounts, but actually in this case, it's all those sorts of, back them into a corner, and until they can't say no. So you're verbally getting them into a position where they can't do anything but agree with you in that moment in time, basically to get you off their back. So it's all those actions, the bullying tactics, the shaming people. So if you have to check with your other half, does your other half actually run the business? I thought it was you. All those sorts of things, all those forcing people to make a decision there and then. Even scripts. I don't agree with scripts. I'm not a fan of scripts. I think that people, when you're really, really annoyed with somebody, and you want, you're gunning for an argument, you're going to go in there, you're going to have a conversation with them. You haven't written down like what you're going to say. Like at best, you've got some mental notes. Like if you can manage in that capacity to get out what you wanted to say and express yourself, why do you need to express yourself robotically using somebody else's words? And that's the thing is it gets in the way of the know, like, trust, particularly when you're working online. If your language isn't, you haven't got continuity with your language, because you become somebody else because that was the sales trainer at the time. You're taking up their words, you're taking up their behaviors, you're saying things that you wouldn't naturally say. And that's the thing is people want to be able to sell within your own spectrum of words. When you start choosing other people's words, that becomes incongruent with who you are. It makes you feel weird, it makes them feel weird, and then that chips away at the trust that you're building.
Again, I'm gonna talk to you like a human because I'm a human, and I love it. I really do. This I wrote. I'm not
sure that would got me bestseller though.
No, that wouldn't be a bestseller. That would not be a bestseller. No, Selling Without Sleaze is a bestseller. I am not trying to change the title here, but I am telling you, man, you hit a couple things here, right? The false scarcity. Oh my goodness, that as a consumer, that drives me crazy. Yeah. Like I look at them like, dude, let's just be honest. Like you're not going to pressure me. If matter of fact, the moment I acknowledge or recognize someone has like a false scarcity tactic, it actually turns me off completely. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do business with you. Like, if you're not giving me the process to think, go through my algorithm in my head before I say yes or no, and I get it. And yes, there is that push pull factor. I like that. But shaming clients, I mean, that is sleaze 101. Like, that is just, guys. I mean, it's 2021.
But
like, this is not okay.
I've met so many people. I've met so many people though who've been told to do that. Wow. By trainers. Like still, like within the last 6 months, I worked with somebody who they'd been told by a trainer that that's what they should say.
Yeah, I believe that. And there are some really famous, I'm not going to call them good, but there are some famous sales trainers or personal development people who teach sales. And I, as a connoisseur in this industry, anytime I think someone's doing something at a level higher or greater than me, I'm like, oh, let me buy your stuff. Let me see what you're teaching. And some of the stuff I'm like, oh my goodness. No wonder why. Like, you're the reason we have a bad name. And because your name is so big, more people. I mean, I've had clients that I'm like, oh, I bought XYZ sales training program and I put it on for all my sales reps. And I'm like, and now you're coming to me asking me how come your sales reps aren't performing? Well, I can tell you why. You're literally giving them garbage, and I don't get that. Let's talk that scripts. I've never heard the analogy broken down the way you said it. Right? I don't have if I'm gonna have a debate with my wife tonight, I don't have a script and say, hey, honey, I'm gonna follow this script. It's a really authentic, organic, natural conversation. But let's go counter opposite of that. If I'm trying to sell my product or my service, right, some newer sales professionals find confidence in that script. So how do you prep that new person to say, okay, you know what, you might not have a script, but here's how we're going to develop your confidence? What does that process look like?
So the confidence comes from structure. So it's a structure to fall back on. So I describe it as a toolbox. So, you have your toolbox in that, like all your different elements in there, your resources, your metaphors, your USPs, your responses to sort of like your 2-3 main needs that you meet, and how you'd go around talking around that, the questions that you need to ask. And so if you give somebody that structure, then they can use that structure to feel that confidence. So I think that a lot of the time what I've seen with scripts is when people are nervous and they take it word by word. And it just removes the brain's ability to, it's not even working, I don't think, the right part of the brain, the correct part of the brain. It's just, they're just reading. And so when something comes in a bit left field, when the customer asks something random that they haven't got on that script, they can't actually think for themselves because their brain's been in this reading state, and then all of a sudden it's kind of forced into the current and what's going on, and it's supposed to respond, and they just can't. And that person could have naturally responded to that question had they not have kind of clipped their own wings to be just thinking around reading that script. So what I do is I get clients to do prompts.
Okay.
So you can structure a call. You've got key conversations, you've got key questions you need to ask. That's I call it signposts. They signpost you off onto different routes of questioning depending on that person's response. You need to know those questions. So have those questions there, and there's nothing wrong with writing notes in a call. If you say to a client, I'm just going to write some notes here, so I've got a clear picture. No one minds about that. And so, that's what you could be doing is you can be filling out those prompts, but it's not telling you word for word. It's telling you what you need to know. And so it's prompting those questions. And then, depending on those responses, they're things that you can already have worked on. And I am a big fan of role play, practicing beforehand. You shouldn't be practicing in front of a customer. Let's face it, it's harder and harder to get in front of your ideal client. And then you don't want to be wasting that opportunity by practicing your sales patter that you could have done with a colleague, with a member of your family, whoever. And so it's the practice before you get in there.
Yeah, I've managed sales reps. One in particular, she was an amazing sales rep. For the life of her, she hated role play. But every time I would get her to role play, it was like pulling teeth. But it was good because you hear the flaws, you hear the disconnect, and yeah, anybody who says, "Hey, man," it's one thing to not like role playing, like I or even hate role playing. I get it. Like I don't like going.
I didn't
I don't.
like
I don't
it.
like role playing. I don't like going to the gym. You got to do both, right? I mean, it's kind of in that same category. So, yeah, I appreciate hearing your perspective on that and having those prompts. I would imagine the more you execute on those prompts, the easier the conversation becomes. Like more repetition. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the thing is it's practice. So then, and as you say, you find the flaws in it, and that's the thing is that's why you need to come out of a call and you actually need to sit and reflect and think, what went well, what would I do differently next time? Like I've tried metaphors and then I've been like, that was really painful and no one got it. Let's not use that one next time. And so, or that one could work, but I think it needs a bit more tweaking. And so it's just understanding like where it's at, and you are going to have an element of learning. If you're not learning in your calls, then like you need to have a bit of a word with yourself. But your initial basics, you can do the basics without having a live customer in front of you. You can make sure you're up to scratch. And I remember working for it was GlaxoSmithKline, and they actually got us to role play with what would be customers. They brought customers in to help us practice, and we had to hit a certain amount of points from that customer in order to be allowed to go out and sell.
Wow.
It was strict. I've not worked from a script. You're not allowed to work from a script, but boy, did I spend hours role playing.
Yeah, I look at some of the most complex sales processes that I was involved in when I was a individual sales contributor. There were very much, I wouldn't say completely scripted, but they were very much prompt. Like I knew the moment the conversation went this direction, this was the line of question. And if it didn't, I knew what my fallback was. Like I never was shooting from the hip. Like, hey, let's talk. Like, what's going on, guys? Like, yeah, you don't want to waste those opportunities. So, all right. So in these prompts you're giving for somebody to sell without sleaze, it comes this magic question. How do I close? Like, when do I say, hey, like in the layman's term, Sarah, will you buy my stuff? Right. But how does that come up in this process of selling without sleaze? I'm following the prompts. I'm not on script. I'm having a normal conversation. What does that process look like?
So you're having a normal conversation. You've understood what's driving that customer's need or want. So you're understanding whether it's a want or a need, how important it is, what the priority is for them. You're driving it based on what their needs are and what their outlook is, not. And that's the thing is a lot of people jump on people as soon as it goes into a certain route. They're like, right, and they kind of pounce. You can actually see them verbally pouncing on this person, and so it's understanding. It's getting a real understanding of that person. That's why the customer should be doing most of the talking. Then you'd move on to explaining and relating how your product and its features and benefits relate to that need, so that they're in a position where they understand how you can meet that need. I tend to say, and this is where I work with people individually, so even when they're doing some of my digital stuff, they will still have a consolidation call where we'll look at and make sure that it's right and it fits for them and their vocabulary, their ideal customer. And so in that conversation, we'll look at, you've gone and explained that to them. I tend to then say to them, what are your thoughts? And that can range from them going, because I'm a bit of a thoughts person, I'm not a feelings person. Some people at that stage might say, how do you feel about that? And you're going to prompt that person to share what they think about what you've just said and how you can relate to their need. That's when your objections, you're kind of almost inviting objections, because that's when they all tend to come up. If that person is saying all the right things, then I'm not start closing as soon as you're opening, but I am keen on, you take that prompt from that person, and so if that is progressing, then you take them along that next stage. And the thing is it might be one call, it might be multiple to get them to a point where they actually purchase, but it's moving them along that sales process. So if they're saying to you, well, great, where do I sign? Then you're not going to go, are you sure? Not got any questions for me? You take that person on face value, and I think I'm always a big fan of doing that. And people are like, well, what happens if they just give me lip service? Well, they're just giving you lip service, but that's for them to flag up and for you to talk through with them at a point when it's raised and when it's clear. Up until that point, take someone at face value, because otherwise you don't look like you've got the trust. You don't look like you do this on a regular basis. I mean, if you're like, you sure you want to progress? It puts doubt in their mind, whereas this is you day in, day out. Why wouldn't you want to? If this is the right solution for that person, why wouldn't they be jumping on it? And so, it's almost, you get into sort of an assumptive sell kind of scenario where you're just like, right, okay, well, where do we go? And I actually did a breakdown the other day I did some training where we went through a transcription of a call that I'd done. And the call was never designed to be transcribed and then used as training. But it was one that I had. And so that was the one I used. And in that, I'd said, so shall we sign you up then? And that was we'd had a chat, we talked about stuff, we'd got clarity. They were very pre-sold. But then, it was just a case of going, so, let's crack on. And so that worked for that person because that was their communication style. And it's understanding what that person's style is like and how you're communicating with them, and therefore how direct you can be. As a fallback when you're first starting out, you go with what's comfortable for you. And so, it's when it makes sense, this person's progressing along, right? Okay, then let's suggest next steps. And obviously you want that buy-in from both. But for me, the close is something that is over-focused on, because for me, it's a bit like an exam. The sales call is a bit like an exam. The work that you've done up to that point, obviously you've got to put pen to paper in an exam. You've got to, fill out and put it down the data. But the groundwork is done for you prior to the call. The less that's done for you prior to the call, the more work you've got to do in the call. But you can. It's important to have that groundwork in, and to then you're going through that process in the call. There's less pressure on the call, and by the time you get to the close, you should know what that person's going to say. It's a bit like proposing. How many guys now get down on one knee without already knowing it's really in the bag? And it's the same with the closing.
I love that. You're absolutely correct, right? Many guys aren't proposing without knowing the answer in advance. They have like a 95%, 98% certainty they know the response. And to hear you say that in the sales process, right? I shouldn't be asking for business at the end without knowing it. It's almost like, there's that old saying, right? There's the assumptive close, right? And for years people talk like, assume you're going to make the sale. The problem with the assumptive close is it assumes, hence the assumptive, it assumes you did a good sales process in the beginning. I can't tell you how many times people try to sell me something, they give me an assumptive close, and I'm like, you're assuming I'm going to buy from you based on what? Like we don't have, you have no idea what I'm struggling with. You have no idea what my problem is. You have no idea how much money this problem is costing me, but you're assuming I'm going to buy your service, business, product, widget, etc. So I like how you say that.
And they don't even know that they can definitely help. And I think that's the thing. And this is a conversation where you figure out, particularly if you're in a service scenario where you're going to be working alongside this person, you don't want to be working with someone if you can't help them. And you don't want to be working with someone if you don't like them. If you can't get on with them, it's a two-way process. It is like dating. Sales is like dating. Don't go proposing on the first date. Don't go jumping into someone's DMs and selling them, because you have no idea. To me, I find it disrespectful. You have no idea if that person is the right person for you. You're not respecting your product, and you're not respecting that person.
Yeah, 100%. And I get sold in my DMs daily, and I've never bought anything someone sells me in the DMs. Not because I'm against it, just mostly 9 out of 10. I'm like, dude, you this is bad. There's some creative ones that get a little bit because I keep saying it on every, I must have said this at least 20 times on podcasts where I'm like, dude, quit selling me in the DMs. And now I get people who are a little bit more creative when they try to sell. Haven't really identified what it is I'm looking for, what I need. And a lot of times it's, because I have a lot of systems in place. So there's not much that I don't need that I don't know where to find. But I always appreciate a good, I appreciate the sportsmanship of sales. I really do. I appreciate the tactic, but selling in the DMs, guys, your first interaction, it's super, that is the definition of sleazy. Yeah.
It is. So I send them, I now have a pre-written response, which includes the landing page to my book.
Good for you. I like that.
Well, I've got friends who use it as well. So yeah, people send them my way.
Good for you.
But it is, and a lot of the time it is a lack. It comes from desperation. And so there is a lack of, what do I do now? And I think a lot of it, they are desperate and they're just like, well, I'll just send this out and then hopefully with somebody it'll stick. The sort of the one that I always kind of recall and make comments around is when I was pregnant with my third child mostly. I'd get PTs messaging me telling me that they could help me lose weight, and I was like, no, I don't think you can. I think midwife can help me lose weight.
I have a different problem, buddy.
And I think you do too if you can't tell the difference. But but it was really interesting that, you know, people do it and it does tend to be out of desperation. And I think that's the thing is when you look at people and certain areas of sales and MLM and all that sort of stuff get a bad name, but it's people who are they're not been trained, they haven't been supported, and that's what happens when people are just kind of thrown out there and told to sell.
Yeah, 100%. You know, Catapulting Commissions family, look at yourself, look at your sales process, look at your company right now. Are you prepared to be where you need to be? Are you prepared to execute where you're supposed to execute? And if you're the business owner, is your team, your sales team, are they trained to execute? Are they trained to sell without sleaze? Because let's just be honest, guys, it is 2021 and the days of this high pressure in your face are going to go away. If they're not already away, I promise you in the next 5 to 10 years, if you look at the younger generation, they are not going to respond to the tactics that sold our grandparents and parents. Like, it just doesn't work. So Sarah Jolley-Jarvis, best-selling author, Selling Without Sleaze. Can you help the Catapulting Commissions family? How do they get connected with you? What's the URL? Where do they track your social media? Where do they learn more about your book? All that fun stuff.
So the best place to find me is on my podcast. So that's Selling Without Sleaze. I mean, like literally, I am consistent across all platforms. So that's Selling Without Sleaze. The information's there on the book. The links are in the show notes. You've also got information straight there to the buy the book, and also my social channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, the regular. So yeah, Selling Without Sleaze is what you're looking for. And I am the only Sarah Jolley-Jarvis in the world. So.
Good for you, Sarah. I am like the 1 millionth Anthony Garcia. It's like the John Smith of Latin names. So
I wasn't, when I was just a Jolly, I was there was a lot more of me, but yeah.
Well, Sarah Jolley-Jarvis, international best-selling author of Selling Without Sleaze. Thank you for joining the Catapulting Commissions show. Catapulting Commissions family, do me that favor. Go like, subscribe, get connected with Sarah, get her book, learn more about Selling Without Sleaze, because the better salesperson you are, the better our industry grows as a whole. You know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you next week.
Right.